People say that religion was developed in response to imponderables, and due to ignorance and fear. That is a very simple, linear, easy explanation. It's the same sort of thinking that has Moses parting the Red Sea by means of some rare natural phenomenon, or Jesus feeding the masses by means of some trick. These sorts of explanations betray a curious ignorance of the workings of the human mind, whatever that is. Robert Graves, the notorious crank, was probably onto something when he suggested that the Greek and Roman myths were to some extent a kind of religious shorthand, and that actual historical events could be discerned lurking beneath the apparent nonsense. For instance, when the god Apollo defeats some terrible monster, this is merely a priest's way of recounting the defeat of one tribe by another, with the people who worship Apollo victorious. Terrible monsters, in antique religious speak, are the gods whose worshippers were subjugated. But this too is simple, linear, and easy. It neglects the horrible truths about human beings. It ignores our capacity for delusion, and the brutal motives we all share. We begin with analogy and its twisted sibling, metaphor. Poetry is merely a form of rhythmic deception. Metaphor strives to become concrete, to take on a life of its own. Metaphor is dissatisfied with being a mere figure of speech, a poetic device. As figures of speech become real, are reified, wonderful errors ensue. A man becomes a horse or a wolf or a goat. Storms and natural disasters become the mighty arms of God. But I'm neglecting analogy in the treacherous word if. If this, if that. If I do this, then so-and-so does that. A bizarre but apparently natural inclination to invent chains of utterly specious cause and effect. Magical thinking. False comparisons and the monster of intent. There is seemingly a very natural inclination to interpret movement, action, events as intentional. This is merely a distortion of inherent mechanisms of defense. One must be wary out in the wild, and a falling rock or strange sound may well indicate the presence of a predator. Likewise, a passing cloud, a hailstorm, or even a drought may indicate the presence of some enemy, unseen but vicious, for, as we all know, it's every man for himself, and God against all. Beneath all of these confusions and automatic misinterpretations lies, vast and squirming, the unholy reproductive drive and its siblings, the defense mechanisms, because one cannot be expected to reproduce if one has been killed. But I neglect the lingering horror of consciousness, which cut us all off from the unreflective continuity enjoyed by other animals. This is our hideous exile. We are, to some extent anyway, aware. When Eve ate of the apple of the tree of knowledge, self-consciousness was born and exile ensued. As metaphors go, this one is pretty well crafted. For thousands of years, human beings have used whatever means were available, sex and drugs and rock and roll and vast seas of alcohol, to defeat consciousness and return to the undifferentiated chaos of paradise. It hasn't worked. We are idiots, and religion is a part of what we are. Destruction is sacred, and God is an omnivore. God is an explanation for evil. We send messengers to God by means of the pyre. Through sacrifice, we return objects to immanence. The sacrificial fire makes profane things holy by destroying them. I return you to God by cutting your throat, and setting you on fire. The king, the embodiment of our tribe, must die in the 13th month. Time is calculated by means of the moon. The wolf clan will don their furs and howl in the night. The devotees of Bacchus, delirious from strong wine, will race through the woods on all fours, dismembering anyone they encounter. Tools are profane. They are of this world. They are useful. God is useless. He or she or it is the embodiment of unknowable evil. God is the name of chaos. God is an idiot. He is sovereign and arbitrary, even whimsical. Through no analogy can God be made a tool. God cannot be used. God is the anti-object. The angels, born 3,000 years ago in Iran, are aspects of Godhead. The angels are the hands of God as he makes himself known in the temporal world. They are not independent entities, they are the agents, the emanations, the actions of God. Satan is merely an aspect of God. Satan, in this sense, is God. In the book of Job, Satan is merely a nagging doubt that God can't quite shake. Monotheism is a monstrosity. God is our enemy. Paradise was merely unconsciousness. Heaven is the revival of a state of mind appropriate for a 2-year-old. Heaven is a crib and a tit. And to make you sacred, to return you to the holy, undifferentiated bliss we all long for, I have no choice but to kill you. You will bleed in the proper ritual manner and then burn. I return you to Godhead. Never again will you be a tool. No need for thanks.